We're going into the 4th week of January. You know what that means, Dr. Mike?
No, I'm not exactly quite sure.
It means, you should know this, it means American Week at Lidl.
Ah, yes.
They've got these, if you're listening and you don't know,
Feed
Lidl,
a septic.
the supermarket chain, they have these themed weeks, like Greek Week. I think there's like an Asian Week, American Week, maybe another French, Italian Week. I don't know. Anyway, when I first heard about American Week, this was years ago, I got excited and went there, completely shocked and embarrassed at the crap that they had. Have you seen this, Mike?
No. What kind of culinary masterpieces are available?
This is, first of all, they have this brand. It's called McKinnedy, which is a complete, not M-C-K-E. No. This M-C-E-N-N-E-D. It's a completely made-up name, like made in Wrocław or Poznan or something like that. And they, I brought up the website for the promotion. They said like hot dog buns.
Because usually you can't get those.
Chicken nuggets.
Can't get those either.
Here's a couple of my favorites here. It says, where is it? Like bacon rashers. Now, the funny thing is, rashers is a British term. We say bacon strips.
Yeah, I saw a picture of that somewhere, and I was not confused.
And then they have another, there's some kind of shake. It's brownie flavor. Again, flavor spelled with the UK spelling. So I'm not sure how American this American Week is exactly.
Lead is a German company in Poland.
Here's another featured item on their American Week sale, Dr. Pepper. So, yeah, special stuff going on at Lidl this week. Well, anyway.
Yeah, we all get excited about Dr. Pepper, John.
The first time I heard about it, I got excited, but not anymore. American Week is a joke. Anyway, welcome to the news. Listen, we know that the big news this week, of course, is the murder of the mayor of Gdańsk, Paweł Adamowicz. But we actually did a separate episode on that subject, which aired a couple of days ago. And so if you haven't listened to that, go check it out on our Facebook page or on our website, KrakCast.pl, and learn all about that. So we decided to keep things on the lighter side of the news this week. You know, a lot of bad news recently in Poland, tragic news, including, of course, last week's murder in Gdańsk. So we're going to keep things light on the news this week. Let's start with some really, really super light stuff like tourism. Do you ever, guys? Do you ever walk through the main square and get tired of the tourists? Do you kind of tune them out? Do you even see them anymore, or do you really kind of?
I just open the window of my apartment. I just hear them screaming outside all day long.
I just avoid the main square.
How do you avoid the main square?
Well, I don't live anywhere near it, and I don't need to go there.
Well, I mention it because government stats came out this week. Almost 14 million people visited Krakow last year in 2018. 14 million. I think they were all walking outside your window, Mike.
Probably, yeah. That's why I don't get much sleep nowadays.
They spent 6.5 billion zlotys. All the numbers going up. More people expected this year, more money coming this year. Interesting part, of those 14 million, how many would you think were domestic tourists, like from inside of Poland?
I would guess somewhere along the lines of 50%, 2/3.
Really? Josh?
Tricky one. I mean, I would have probably, first guess would have been about half. But then I think I've gotten better over the years at recognising people speaking Polish who clearly are not actually local, and they are, dressed up nicely.
You must be good.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, the correct number, the winning number, 10.4 million. Let's call it 2/3. So, Mike, that was a pretty good guess. Let's call it 2/3. Domestic tourists from inside of the country. Again, the numbers going up all the time. The question for you guys is this sustainable? Do we have a real functioning city anymore, or are we turning into a Disneyland for tourists?
Scary as it is, I think we are turning into a bit of another Prague or something along those lines. Not so bad yet, but it gets crowded, especially around the summertime, and it's kind of weird because the city will be full at a certain hour, and then half an hour later, just when restaurants start to close down or when most families go off back to the hotels, it's just dead. It's weird, and you try to do anything during the daytime, trams, roads, they're clogged. It's a nightmare, but then the atmosphere seems to completely disappear a few hours later.
There was another piece of news that showed up in the local media this week, kind of more anecdotal proof that we are moving towards a Disneyland slowly but surely. There's kind of an iconic bar that, Mike, I think you know more about than I do, which sounds really bad when I say it like that. Sorry, but not to suggest you're a degenerate alcoholic. But there's a bar called Bomba on Plac Szczepański.
Yep, Bomba. I actually had my 30th there. Surprise party. My wife actually organized it, and I was genuinely surprised. I was not expecting anything that night. a lot of fun. But yeah, after about 10 years, they're apparently going to have to close their doors.
Yeah, the building it's in is being turned into a hotel, another hotel. And so people online are talking about how, you walk down the street these days and it's just hotel after restaurant after cafe for tourists, after gift shop, after another hotel, and so on and so on. There are fewer and fewer non-tourism related businesses left in the center of town. And, what does this mean for we changed so much in the last 10 years. What are we going to look like 10 years from now? Josh, you got thoughts on this?
Well, I suspect the trend will continue because the city will continue to be popular with tourists, and actually the better equipped it is to deal with tourists, the more of an attraction it will become, and that it's circular in a circular fashion that will continue. The question is how detrimental that is to people who actually live here, make their living here, and everything. How important is it to have a range of, shall we call them, local amenities right in the city centre, when the city centre is perhaps something that is better geared towards these tourists? And you mentioned the figures, John. I mean, we're not talking insignificant sums of money here. I mean, one of the reasons I think that Krakow is in such good shape is surely connected with this extra income that is generated by its value as a tourist attraction. So yeah. I think, increasingly we've talked about this in other programs. We've got this kind of slightly absurd proliferation of shopping malls generally around the periphery of the city rather than in the centre, with the exception of Galeria Krakowska and I suppose to an extent Galeria Kazimierz. But there doesn't seem to be any problem with shopping in day-to-day terms. If you want to go out and have a drink, let's not forget that 20 years ago there wasn't really anywhere you could have a drink in the central areas.
Yeah, it is easy to beat up on the tourism industry because, it kind of affects our quality of life in a negative way. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it does help to keep the unemployment rate low, right? Yeah. It does provide jobs for a lot of people. It does provide a lot of tax revenue for the government. What they do with that money, I have no idea. But presumably there are lots of things that we have here that we have thanks to the money that tourists leave behind. And so it's definitely, there are pros and cons to being, a tourist destination. At the same time, though, we're not at the level of we're not a London, we're not a Paris or a Rome. We're not at that world-class level. Krakow's probably a secondary tourist destination, right? Because of our size and because of, in Poland, a lot of people who go on European vacations still don't make Poland part of it's a London, Paris, Rome, Vienna kind of thing. They don't come here, generally speaking. Maybe that'll change going forward. But my point is, it could be a lot worse than it is. Go to Prague and see, the nightmare scenario, yeah?
Yeah, or go to Venice, I think, which is
Venice.
Possibly.
Or what's the place down there in Croatia on the
Dubrovnik?
Dubrovnik. It's a cliche, basically, and so places like Dubrovnik and Prague, and they're a victim of their own charm. They're so nice, everybody wants to go, and because everybody goes, they're not so nice anymore. So I wouldn't like to see Krakow go the way of Prague. Prague is just extremely tacky, but that's a different show. On the subject of this tourism, all these places, Mike, these hotels and restaurants and bars, they have to advertise. And some new rules coming in from the local government about how they can do that advertising.
Well, yeah, there are laws and legislations on the books right now basically saying that, the city has to look nice. So you can't have, huge signs in front of bars and restaurants. A few years ago, they cleaned it up. Another step in that direction was to cut back on advertising. You walk around the city right now, on fences and people's windows, you see ads for everything, not just restaurants and bars, but for printing services, for dry cleaners, for tapestry, for
tires,
everything is advertised. And you can see they just, went to the first company they could, printed out something, just stuck it on the wall or on the fence. A lot of these advertisements aren't there legally. They're all over the place. And this new legislation that's being considered was actually supposed to go into effect not too long ago, was supposed to cut back on that. But the legislation was, discarded with the argument being that it would have been too restrictive. Part of the law says that you couldn't have had ads within 100 meters of an intersection. Well, that's half the city.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Another part of the law said that advertisements couldn't be on any building above the ground level. So how many buildings do you see with like balconies covered with advertisements? And a lot of people are saying like, well, if we get rid of all these advertisements, there's so many companies out there that will lose business. The only places you could advertise would be bus stops or huge billboards that are far away from the street. You also have to remember one thing, that a lot of buildings here, building associations, make extra money by allowing companies to put ads on the side of their building.
Right, these mega huge banners, yeah.
So the law says you can't do that anymore. Not only are people losing their jobs, but also these buildings would also have to charge, more for rent, more for utilities, and et cetera. So, there's a lot of stories going on here.
This issue of the difficulty of managing advertisements, this reminds me of something. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. I remember very clearly that the government carried out this surprise inspection of the businesses on Florianska Street. It was only on Florianska Street because, it had reached this tacky stage where buildings started to look ridiculous because there were ads on top of ads. And because it's Florianska Street and because the buildings are zabytków, what do you call it?
Historical monuments or landmarks.
Like in the UK, what do you say, Josh? Listed?
Yeah.
Okay. So, they're protected. So you need permission to do anything, to make any physical change in their appearance. You need permission. And so the local government carried out this surprise inspection, and they went door to door, building by building on the length of Florianska Street. And I've forgotten the exact number, but it was something on the order of 85 or 90% of all the signs on the street had no permission to be there, because the government had made it so difficult and so the process was so restrictive that most businesses just said, screw it, I'll just do what I want, and on the off chance that I get caught, I'll just pay the 200 zloty fine or whatever. And the result is that the street was just full of and not just regular simple metal plaque or something like that, neon advertisements and flashing lights and stuff like that. And so if you think Florianska Street is tacky today, you should have seen it 6 or 7 years ago. And, today they have these regulations where theoretically businesses like hotels and even McDonald's, they have to have these signs that they hang perpendicular to the building. There's like a wrought iron, not a frame, but what do you call it? Something the sign hangs from. And, to make it look kind of sort of tasteful. You know what I'm talking. You've seen these things, right?
They can't be too extravagant, yeah.
Exactly. So there are still some violations of this. There are still some signs that clearly don't belong on that street, but it's been cleaned up quite a bit. So the idea that they're going to strictly manage where billboards and other signs appear all over the city is
and
naive.
A lot of critics of the suggested new legislation say, why don't we just enforce the laws we already have on the books? Half of the ads you see out there are not there legally. People are just basically putting something on their printer at home, putting it in a laminated piece of plastic and sticking it on the wall. And then there's another guy doing it for his parking space there. Then you walk around certain parts of town where it's just like this massive mix of colors and old ads, fading away. It's just disgusting and completely it takes away from the spirit of the city.
Well, moving on, but still on the subject of laws that either do or don't work or are not implemented effectively. Dr. Mike, give us an update on the latest chapter in the drama of the on again, off again, on again, off again, maybe on again ban on alcohol sales. Well,
just so we put it out there right away, right now you can buy alcohol after 10 o'clock from stores in the center of town. Laws were brought in that were supposed to ban this on December the 26th. So that in the center of town, you couldn't buy alcohol from a store. You could still buy it in bars, but you couldn't buy it from a store in the evening. An owner of several stores took this to court saying it hadn't gone through the proper legal procedures, consultations with the public, blah, blah, blah. So a judge basically said yeah, you're right. This doesn't fit. Until we get to a legal decision, I'm putting in a stop to this law. And once the next court decides whether or not this is legal, you can still keep selling. And the next court basically said, okay, you're right. This law is false. It's got to be taken off the books. But according to the previous court, it said okay, you can put in this ban on the ban until the next court decides. The next court decided that you can't drink, that you can't sell. Okay, I'm getting confused here myself. But the law hadn't been struck down yet. So even though both courts said the law was inappropriate, blocking the law was no longer in effect. So technically for 3 days, you couldn't buy alcohol after 10 o'clock, even though both courts have said that this law was unjust. Because, but then after 3 days, the city council got together and said, okay, this law is officially off the books.
I think we're all lost, Mike.
Yeah, I had this on a piece of paper. I wrote it out myself. And I think I had drank too much earlier.
But wait, so the court... Basically, it's a problem of the process, not the idea that alcohol can be banned.
The law will come into effect sooner or later, but they have to rewrite it.
Yeah, so it's about the legal process for implementing this, for how this kind of thing is decided. Essentially, you would think that the city government would know how to, how they have to do their own job. They don't know. Isn't it worrying? Should we be worried by the fact that the city government is passing laws that can't be implemented because they weren't done right?
I mean, they don't want us to drink too much, but it sounds like that when they're putting these laws in the books, they were smoking something. I mean,
well, I don't know. So, as of today, right now, you can
after 10 o'clock buy alcohol. I mean, you can buy it whenever the store is open.
But soon, the law that should have gone into effect properly about a month ago will make the sales of alcohol after 10 o'clock in shops, not in restaurants and bars, but in shops, illegal, right?
Exactly. In the center of town.
In the center of town.
You cross the street, you can buy it. So
I think, in the Staro Miasto and Kazimierz, and maybe in Podgorza, I don't remember. So in 2 districts. So you can go to a 24-hour alcohol store, outside of the center, and you're fine. But here in the center and in Kazimierz, 10 o'clock is the cutoff. For the stores, you can just go into the bar that's right next door to the store, basically, right? How stupid is this, really?
I'm confused, like I said. Well, you might have noticed.
Did I get that right, though?
I think. The
store is closed, but just go to the bar. There's probably a bar on either side of the store.
Right.
That's open until 5 in the morning.
And you can absolutely fill your boots,
And you can just get wasted if you want to. We'll see. Moving on again, January is dead of winter. It's our least favorite time of the year. And one of the reasons is because this is when people get sick. This is flu season. And apparently, Dr. Mike, we've got a bit of a wave of flu illness passing through the city at the moment.
Yeah, this year it's been a pretty bad season as the statistics are showing that there's more people getting sick than in previous years. And actually, there have been reports as well of, the dreaded swine flu, H1N1.
Talked about that last week.
Exactly, popping up. There have been, I think, about a dozen cases confirmed. So not only suspected, but actually, tests done and run, and they confirmed in the university hospital here.
Now, how much more? Now, I know it's not fatal to humans, but it does make us sick. How much worse is having swine flu than having the regular flu?
H1N1 is generally associated with a larger chance of complications and of death. We're still talking, low percentages here. So if you're properly treated, you're hospitalized, you're not going to die. But on the scale of the country, when you have thousands of people getting sick, then when you have H1N1, instead of 10 people dying, it might be 30 or something along those lines on an average.
But day-to-day symptoms are basically the same
basically
or worse?
Same.
So your skin turns pink and you smell of bacon.
Roll in the mud.
Bacon. We were talking about bacon at Lidl a little earlier, so it all comes together. Yeah. But generally speaking, flu season is hitting the city pretty hard right now, all of Poland, and people often confuse the flu and colds. Colds, you don't get a fever. I mean, there are a lot of symptoms that overlap, but generally in the flu, you're hit. It's like being hit by a ton of bricks. It's not just, a sniffling nose and a sore throat.
Oh, you know it when you have the flu.
You're in bed. You're not like going to work feeling a little crappy. That's a cold.
Body aches and
you're
hallucinations.
Not moving out of bed when you get the flu. So there's a difference. There are a lot of people say they have the flu. No, you just have a bad cold.
All right, tell us, on the subject of flu, tell us as a doctor, can't believe they made you a doctor, but as a doctor, do you recommend that people get flu shots?
Yes, I do. There's a lot of, we're not even talking about like anti-vaxxers, stuff like that, but a lot of people complain. I think, John, you might know one person.
I am one of these people. Okay, since you mentioned it, what is this, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, for the first time in my life, I got a flu shot, and within 12 hours, I was sick as a dog for about a week. And maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's cause and effect. I have no idea, but I will never get another flu shot. And by the way, I almost never get, this year I think I did have the flu. Almost never have the flu though, but I've never been as sick in my life as when I got a flu shot.
Just out of curiosity, what time of the year did you get that flu shot? What month was it?
It was before Christmas, so maybe November, maybe.
Pretty late in the season, because
did I get a bad shot or something?
No. Flu shots do sometimes cause a person to feel a little run down, not 100%, but it usually takes a little bit longer than 12 hours. And if you get hit really hard after 12 hours, that means you're already sick actually before. You're probably already infected by somebody a few days or a week or so before, because there's an incubation period with the flu.
Right, yeah.
Flu
so
shots.
How do you explain the fact that so many people, and I'm one of them, so many people don't get flu shots and also don't get the flu? Explain that, Mr. Science.
Mr. Science. Okay, I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. Not everybody gets the flu, and sometimes you do get the flu, but it goes through. You get it very mildly. Just feel a little bad for a day or two.
True.
You're just a carrier. You don't realize it. The problem is, and actually, that's another problem. A lot of people are a little bit sick, but it's not full blown. But they're a carrier. They spread it around. They go around public transportation. They sneeze on something. They touch their hands. They don't wash their hands, and the next person who gets it pass on to another person who actually has serious symptoms. When you have more people being vaccinated, it helps break that chain. It makes it less likely that you'll be a carrier of a mild form to pass it on to somebody else, who will pass it on to somebody else and get a more intense version.
It's so easy to pass the flu along through, as you say, sneezing or whatever, so easy to contract the flu. How is it that, let's say a household of 4 people, one person has the flu, why don't the other 3 people automatically definitely get the flu? Why not?
It's highly contagious.
Oftentimes they don't.
But often they do get it. It's just not so intense. It's not that they go through it with such severe symptoms. You just feel, like I said, a little crappier. Mm-hmm. And sometimes somebody by you gets the flu, but your immune system is pretty strong, and it starts to build up the antibodies, so it prevents you from getting even sicker. It's kind of like a mini vaccine. It's a very unofficial way to put it, but just because of the fact that you don't have full-blown symptoms of the flu doesn't mean that you're not sick. Like I said, a lot of people get colds right now, and they might actually have a mild version of the flu. And the vaccine basically helps stop that chain of events happening from being passed on from person to person. And a lot of people do get the flu in a year. It's in like 5% of the population. That's a huge amount.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get sick. The complications get spread around. People die of the flu. People die of pneumonia related to the flu, of complications.
But, as long as we're on the subject of the flu, of course, the vaccine is, to prevent it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But once you get the flu, is there anything you can, in terms of medicine, anything you can do? I know you can, something to alleviate the symptoms. But do you just have to wait it out until it's gone, or is there something you can take to get rid of the flu?
You're not going to get rid of it. There are some medications, antiviral medications out there, but
symptoms for the runny nose.
There are actual antiviral medications, but they only make sense if you take it from day one, and most people don't realize. And if you take it a day or two later, it's kind of pointless. But it's everything else, just treatment of symptoms, keeping yourself hydrated, warm, comfortable, and waiting it out. But if symptoms do progress, if they do get serious, if this fever starts to get really high, then you do have to go see a doctor, because there are other associated illnesses you can start having a problem with, like say pneumonia, organ failure, etc. These are like rare cases, but they do happen. But generally, you just have to wait it out and stay at home. For Christ's sake,
speaking of drugs and medicine, another subject in the news, apparently some of the drugs that people expect to find when they go to the drugstore or the pharmacy are not there. And the reasons are a little bit surprising and frustrating, Dr. Mike.
It's all thanks to the EU open market mixing together with socialized healthcare. In Poland, when you go to a pharmacy, you have a prescription from a doctor. A lot of medication is cheaper. There's a discount, 20, 30, 40%, or it's
like subsidized,
free. Yeah? It's subsidized, exactly. But a lot of people don't realize that a lot of medication that you buy on prescription that you don't actually get a full subsidy is cheaper than it would be anyway, because the government buys it in bulk from pharmaceutical companies, and then the warehouses stock it and sell it to pharmacies that order it. The problem is that we're in an open market, and there's kind of a quasi-pharmaceutical mafia going on right now. Well, they buy these cheap subsidized medications from warehouses or from pharmacies and then ship it over to other EU countries where these same medications are more expensive. This is going on with a lot of, say, asthma medications, a lot of chemotherapy drugs, certain types of insulin as well. In Poland, they're a lot cheaper than in, say, in Germany or France, and this is causing lapses in supply. People are going to their pharmacy, the pharmacy is saying, oh, we don't have it, and the warehouse that we usually buy it from doesn't have it. There's talk about bringing in new legislation to kind of stop the outflow of medication, but this could take a year or 2 or 3, and then there's the whole talk about the fact, well, we're supposed to have an open market, so this is a consequence of that. When the government subsidizes something and makes it cheaper, well, in an open market, somebody else is going to want to buy it.
Wait. Wouldn't you think that the government, the Polish government, after spending God knows how much money subsidizing this medicine, wouldn't you think there would be some kind of controls in effect to make sure that those medications ended up on shelves in Poland?
There are, and this is why I'm saying it's kind of a quasi-mafia, because they get there are so many loopholes between who can buy them, between warehouses, and then you have warehouses which have subsidiary, daughter companies in other countries. They sell between themselves, and this stuff just disappears in inventory. It's
mysterious dealings, huh?
Exactly.
I like the idea of a pharmaceutical mafia. Interesting.
It's like, why sell weed illegally?
Drug gangs.
When you can sell chemotherapy drugs for, a huge markup.
We're going to bring things to a close with a quick mention of something we've talked about a lot lately, like really a lot. So much, in fact, we did not one, but 2 shows dedicated to this subject. Of course, I'm talking about Wisla Krakow. We should insert a laugh track in there somewhere, Josh. But,
I have those available.
Yeah, let's
stick it in there right now.
Let's laugh it up. We're talking
Wisla
about
Krakow, people.
One little thing of interest popped up a couple of days ago. These 3 actually it's 2 businessmen, a Krakow-based businessman, a Warsaw-based businessman, and a football player, Jakub Błaszczykowski. They are getting together and trying to kind of find a path that will lead Wisła back to financial health and, allow them to stay in the extra class of the highest level of Polish football. And one of the tools they want to use is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, something you associate with, startups and
this will go well.
Different kinds of businesses. The idea is and this is they're not the first to think of this. There are plenty of sports teams, I know they do this in America sometimes, where fans can buy shares in the club. Of course, it's very much limited. It's not a controlling share. It's not a voting share. It's almost for symbolic. It's the kind of thing that you frame and put on your wall. I own 1 share out of 57 million in this club or whatever. Anyway, they hope to raise a certain amount of money through crowdfunding and, again, use that to kind of leverage their way into other deals that will allow them step by step to save the sinking ship. Are you going to buy some shares in Wisła?
Sinking ship. This is like
they're bottom of the ocean.
Yeah,
they salvaged the ship.
They hit it hard. They fell apart right now. They're in the mud like 5 meters.
I mean, on the one hand, I like the fact that they're being creative. Some people might say desperate, but I would say creative, and crowdfunding is a thing. And it's legitimate, it's respectable. Plenty of legitimate businesses do raise money on crowdfunding, but the amount they need, and given their history, which again we've talked about extensively, any number of conventional, regular businessmen have looked at the situation and said, yeah, no, thank you. And
it's only internet news right now with a little bit of cash are going to be the ones going to be suckered into this.
We'll see. So if you want to buy a share of Wisła, now is your chance. And actually, no, sorry, I said that was going to be the last thing. Actually, this is the last thing. Earlier this week, you may or may not know this, but earlier this week, Poland celebrated Grandparents' Day. I think Monday was for Grandma, Tuesday was for Grandpa. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Grandparents' Day. Now, I'll be honest. Until my own daughter was in preschool, and I was told that there was a special presentation, a special kind of not presentation, but like a concert that the kids put on for grandparents. I had no idea that there was a Grandparents' Day.
And you should know, John, because this basically apparently came from the U.S. Brought in the legislation was introduced by, I believe, one of your favorite presidents, right?
Millard Fillmore?
Carter, yep.
Oh, Jimmy Carter? Yeah. Oh, so this is what he did for 4 years, huh?
Yeah.
Wait, this is an American thing? I never heard of it before I lived here.
Yeah, I was reading up on this, and apparently Jimmy Carter brought in the legislation in 78, 79 for Grandparents' Day. There, it's one day, first Sunday after Labor Day, so a completely different part of the year.
Labor Day's in September.
Yeah, but it was the impetus, the inspiration in the 80s here in Poland for them to do something similar, and here they separated into 2 separate days, one after the other. And now it's something preschool kids always doing, something that I always have to remember, otherwise my grandmother will get really pissed off at me.
Yeah, this is definitely not on the scale of, Mother's Day or Father's Day or anything like that. And you're not going to see, Impeak filled with cards for Grandmother's Day or Grandfather's Day. But it is a big deal at schools, especially preschools and whatnot. They put on special performances. Grandparents love to come and watch. And so it is a thing. So
is this kind of driven by parents reminding grandparents that they need to pull their weight with the children from time to time?
Oh, I've also noticed in years gone by that there's maybe they don't really have too many cards and stuff like that, but I've noticed ads on TV for dietary supplements for the heart and stuff like that. Like, you care about your grandparent, this is the perfect gift.
You care about your grandparent,
like stair lifts and
you don't want them to die.
Well, on that note of celebrating Grandparents' Day, that's the news for this week. Guys, thanks as always for listening, and please tell a friend, share on Facebook, give us a like, support the show any way you can. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on the KrakCast.